Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Hayes. Lukoil, Russia's second largest oil producer, has announced plans to sell its international assets. This decision was made in response to the restrictive measures and sanctions recently imposed by the United States. The U.S. sanctions also target Rosneft with the aim to pressure Vladimir Putin into an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. What are the implications of Lukoil's sales, especially for the Central and Eastern European region? To tell us more, we bring in Wojciech Jakóbik, energy security analyst at the Energy Security Center. Good morning and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, my pleasure.
So, does Lukoil's announcement come as a surprise geopolitically, but also from the point of view of energy markets?
So we can clearly that Lukoil's statement is having an impact on its position on the market. It has lost over 10% of Russians are having this fear of greater impact of new American sanctions. We don't know about the amount of losses when it comes to Rosneft yet. This is the second company really important in this field, which is not commenting the American decision yet, but it could be impaired in Central and Eastern Europe to the similar extent as Lukoil. Everything depends on the extent to which the sanctions are really imposed, because one thing is to have the sanctions in place and the second thing is the enforcement, and depending on the degree of enforcement on the American side, we'll see the real effect. For now, it is an butterfly effect coming from fear, because Russians don't know what to do, the financial market don't know how to act, but there is still some room for adaptation. So I look forward to the extent in which Americans are really enforcing those sanctions.
And how much of a shock is the announcement for European energy markets, and especially for Bulgaria and Romania, where Lukoil owns major refineries? What does it mean for those countries on a practical level?
It is a shock for anyone who is having Russian assets in its strategic sectors like energy and fuel supply. It was to be removed a long time ago, like the Schwedt refinery in Germany or the refineries that you have mentioned in Romania or Bulgaria. Those are the installations with Russian ownership in it, and it was a clear danger for the security of supply, and now we see the real danger of their continued operation. It is said that Bulgarian and Romanian refineries could even stop its procurements because of new US sanctions. The situation with Russian refinery in Germany, the Schwedt refinery, PCK refinery in city of Schwedt, is not resolved yet. We hear that Germans are negotiating with Americans some kind of exemptions, but we also hear from Bloomberg news agency that there was an ultimatum from US that Germans are having 6 months to remove Russians from the ownership, and that would be a good solution. If the sanctions make Europeans quit the last parts of reliance on Russians, that would be better for everyone in the West.
We hear that Bulgaria plans to take temporary control of the Burgas refinery, much like Germany did with Rosneft's Schwedt facility, like you just mentioned. How effective is the model in safeguarding national energy security without full nationalization?
So in line with the definition, it is a temporary solution. So, for example, in Schwedt, this so-called temporary solution is lasting for over 3 years. So we need to find some solution that is a long-term way to provide security of supply. So, of course, there could be some deal on exemption that would make those countries find some solution, but it is not a solution. It is a way to have some solution in place, and the best solution is to diversify all the assets which are under Russian influence. It needs to be underlined that having Russian influence over the gas storage in Europe made it possible for Kremlin to introduce the energy crisis in Europe before the invasion in Ukraine, because the gas storage under Gazprom influence were not gaining supplies before the heating season, and that was one of the main of the reasons of the energy crunch that has started in 2021. So the threat is real. We need to remove Russian influence over our strategic infrastructure, and American sanctions are another reason to do it as quickly as possible.
Now, going back to the sale, analysts mentioned potential buyers like Hungary's MOL, Azerbaijan's Sokar, and Kazakhstan's Kazmuni gas. But with most of them doing business with Lukoil, is there realistically any Western buyer that could step in?
Well, I could even imagine some buyer from US, as Americans are reviving their hydrocarbons sector and they are looking for opportunities worldwide. Trump's administration is refueling this initiative of American energy dominance, as they call it. They are also speaking about 3Cs initiative that was supported by Poland, Croatia, and other nations in Central and Eastern Europe. So there is a win-win solution that removing Russians could mean increasing Western oversee over the strategic infrastructure, including some American involvement. And when it comes to Schwedt refinery in Germany, there were advanced talks on introducing Orlen, Polish company Orlen ownership in Schwedt. It is a great time to discuss it once again.
Do you think it's realistic?
Of course, why not? It is a great investment, like we've seen in Lithuania. Poles invested in Lithuanian refinery in Mažeikiai, and now it is a main supplier in this part of Europe. It is a main job provider in Lithuania, and because of this cooperation, Polish-Lithuanian relations revived, and they are really fruitful right now. This cooperation is compiling the political and economic reasons. The Schwedt refinery is also important for the eastern flank of NATO, because in times of crisis, it is providing the fuel supply not only to Germany, but also to the western part of Poland. We are discussing NATO pipeline coming from Germany to Poland in case of war, and it would be fueled also with the Schwedt refinery. And we see the Leuna refinery also in eastern Germany that is fully diversified. It is fully independent from Russian supply already. So it is possible, and it is a good way to go forward.
One of the things about Lukoil is that it is a private company, unlike the state-controlled Rosneft.
Private, yeah.
Exactly. Does this dramatic move suggest a rift between Lukoil's commercial interests and the Kremlin's geopolitical strategy, or is it a calculated maneuver that ultimately aligns with the interests of the Russian state?
So Lukoil is not having such security umbrella as Rosneft is having, because Rosneft is a state-owned enterprise. It is having priority in Russian oil and fuel supply industry. So Lukoil is more exposed to the international market impact when it comes to American sanctions, and Rosneft would be provided with greater shield from the Kremlin. But this is not meaning that Lukoil will not look for some loopholes, for some different solution to make this cooperation in the West work. The most important part of its announcement is about the selling of assets. So it is admitting that it is having issues with American sanctions, but depending on the enforcement of those sanctions, we'll see how it turns out, because everything depends on determination on American side. Another example is the Arctic LNG 2 project from Novatek that was sanctioned by Joe Biden's administration. But when Trump's administration started to speak with Russians about some Siberian projects, possible cooperation in LNG sphere, the transport of LNG from Arctic LNG that was frozen by sanctions was revived, and it was coming to China once again. So everything depends on determination on our side, especially American side.
Now, I want to move on to Hungary and Slovakia. There are recent reports that suggest that those countries are resisting tougher measures on Russian energy. Are they undermining EU unity, or are they simply protecting their own energy security?
If they would protected their security, they would invest in decreasing reliance on Russia long time ago, and they didn't do so. They even increased reliance on Russian gas and oil supplies in spite of Russian incursion into Ukraine. So they are not working in line with their own security. They are trying to undermine common European stance on Russian behavior, but they are not able to do it to full extent, because one thing is sanctions that are anonymous to be passed. We need an anonymous vote in favor of any sanctions coming from European Union against Russia. But when it comes to trade solutions that were proposed by European Commission that will make any Russian gas contract disappear in 2028, we just need some majority vote. So Slovakia and Hungary could have some trouble with blocking this regulation, and that is why they are so vocal about those issues. But looking at Hungary, there is growing discontent with the Budapest policy internally and when it comes to foreign policy. So we'll see how it goes when there is a government change in Budapest.
I just want to return to Poland for a moment, just as we wrap up. Poland has been credited with securing a revision clause, so to speak, for the EU's ETS2 emissions trading scheme. In your opinion, how significant is this move politically and economically for Poland and the region?
So we've had a huge alliance around the ETS2 revision, and it was granted by European Commission that the directive would be changed. We don't know the substance of those changes. It will be discussed with European countries, including Poland, but we are opening the Pandora box. We'll see what goes out of it. We could see some delay in introducing ETS2 on one hand, but on the other hand, we could see some increase in pace of introducing the support mechanisms connected to ETS2. So the countries like Poland, which will have huge economic issue with ETS2 introduction, will have more time to adapt and more money to fund the modernization and other investment needed to be prepared for ETS2 somewhere in 2030.
And what about the impact of this for your regular average EU citizen? Just very briefly.
So the assumption is that we'll have more clean air, less pollution in energy and heating sector and in transport sector also, but it is a really expensive investment that is counted for billions of zlotys. So it would increase the price of fuel, because the price of ETS2 will be introduced in retailer market. When you sell fuel, you'll pay for its CO2 emission connected to its production. So the main impact when it comes to economy is an increase in fuel prices, and in times of economic turmoil, it is a really troublesome issue from the point of view of politicians.
Okay, Wojciech Jakóbik, Energy Security Analyst at the Energy Security Center. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you too. Bye.
And that wraps up World Talks for this morning. Thanks so much for being with us, and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.